Hello everyone and welcome to How To in Access 2013. My name is Steve Bishop, and in this video I'm going to show you how to import an Excel spreadsheet using VBA code. So before I begin showing you the code, let me go ahead and show you where I got my sample Excel data from. And the first thing I did was I just did a search for Excel sample data, and from there, I found this Tableau community post here where there is a sample Superstore sales Excel spreadsheet. And there's plenty of data in this Excel spreadsheet. Now you can use whatever Excel spreadsheet that you want, just so long as it is an actual XLS or XLSX file. So it can be a newer or an older version of Excel. It cannot, however, be a CSV file or a tab delimited file. It needs to be a full Excel spreadsheet. So this sample Superstore sales Excel spreadsheet has plenty of data in it, and I'm just going to show this to you. It's got 8,400 rows here, so there's plenty of data, and there's even some column headers here, so row ID and sales and profit and province and all sorts of good stuff that you can certainly tinker around with and practice with. So I'm going to first start off by focusing on the method that I'm going to create that's going to import the Excel spreadsheet to a table in our Access database. So I'm going to go to Database Tools and Visual Basic, and I'm going to right click on this Import Excel, and in case you're wondering where that came from, that's the name of my Access database that I created. So I'm just going to right click on this, and I'm going to go to Insert a new module in my project. So in my module, I'm going to go ahead and create a public subroutine, and I'm going to go ahead and call this Import Excel Spreadsheet. And in this Import Excel Spreadsheet, I'm going to need a couple of parameters that get passed into it. These are a couple of unknowns at this point, such as the file name, which is the Excel spreadsheet that we're going to import. And then the table name. What is the name of the table that we want to save the data to? So we're going to do file name first as string. So this is going to be a string that's going to have the file name. And then what is the table name going to be? So table name also as a string. And let's go ahead and end our subroutine there. So the actual command that imports an Excel spreadsheet to Access database is found already implemented in Access, and it comes from the do command object where there is a method called transfer spreadsheet. And the transfer spreadsheet method accepts several different parameters. The first one here, which is kind of obscured by this hint here, we can see the IntelliSense we can't really see, but if we type A, then we can actually see the IntelliSense. And the first option in this enumerable is AC export. So AC export would tell this transfer spreadsheet method that I want to take the data from a table and export it to an Excel spreadsheet. But that's not what we want to do. We want to do the AC import, which takes the data from an Excel spreadsheet and imports it as a table to Access. Now this third option of AC link would actually leave the Excel spreadsheet alone and just create a link in your Access database to that Excel spreadsheet. So it would sort of like a linked table would be, where it creates a linked table name in your Access that actually is just a pointer to the Excel spreadsheet data, and it leaves that Excel spreadsheet alone. Now that may seem like a really good idea for a lot of scenarios, but I'm going to kind of tell you that it's really not as good as it may first seem. That's because the Excel spreadsheet might get deleted, for example, and now your Access database doesn't have the data anymore. Or perhaps the Excel spreadsheet gets moved, or maybe you move your Access database to another computer or to a server, and once you make that move, that Excel spreadsheet may not exist, or it may not be in the same folder location. So it really becomes very tricky if you try to link your Excel spreadsheets to an Access database. But it is possible using this transfer spreadsheet method. I'm going to go ahead and use the AC import, and we're going to import the data from the Excel spreadsheet. And we need to specify what type of Excel spreadsheet it is. There are several different versions that are out there, and we're going to use the latest one, which is AC Spreadsheet Type Excel 12. If you use this Excel 3, then you may run into problems importing the newer file types, the XLSX. But if you use the newer version, the Excel 12, then it won't have any trouble getting either type of files. It works with both XLS and XLSX. So we're just going to use that one. Now the table name parameter is something that we're passing into the import Excel spreadsheet method already. So I can just pass along table name. Same thing goes for the file name. We are passing it as a parameter to this import Excel spreadsheet method. So we'll just pass it along once again to the transfer spreadsheet method. Now after the file name, it's asking us has field names, and this is a true or false Boolean value that it's looking for. Has field names is referring to the first row in our spreadsheet. Does it contain the name or the headers of the column? So for example, column A has a header of row ID in this first row. Same thing for column F. Column F's first value is sales. And so this first row is not data. It doesn't contain any actual data. It contains the column headers or the column names. And as such, this import utility needs to know, is the first column or the first row of each column the name of the column, or is it actual data? And since this spreadsheet that I'm importing here does have a first row that is our column names, I need to say that yes, this is true. Now you may want to make this import Excel spreadsheet method accept this as another parameter, so something like has column headers and as a Boolean value, and then you could just simply pass that along. But I just know that typically when I work with Excel spreadsheets, I always like to make sure that those column headers are there anyway. That way there's no confusion about what kind of data each column is. So I'm just going to leave this true for now. And the next parameter that comes after that is range. Now the range parameter is talking about the range of our Excel spreadsheet. So is this something like A1 through M32? So we would pass that along here as a string of something like A1 through M54 or something like that. Now you could pass also along the page name. And that's really what this is for, so that you can specify a particular page on an Excel spreadsheet and then get specific rows and columns on that page. But I'm not really going to get into that. I'm going to let you try to research that on your own about how to fill in that range. I'm really not that concerned about it when it comes to this. Most particularly because once I do an import of everything, I can use Access to go through that table and pick out the columns and pieces of data that I need. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave this blank, this range parameter blank, because I'm just going to grab everything from that main page. The use OA is actually deprecated. I'm not really even sure why this still exists on this transfer spreadsheet method. There's no use for it anymore, so you can go ahead and leave that blank as well. And since the last two parameters of this transfer spreadsheet method call are blank, I don't even need those extra commas at the end. I can just leave off here on the true. So our logic is in place to do the actual transfer of our Excel spreadsheet to a table. Now I need to create our user interface along with the code behind that user interface that's going to call this import Excel spreadsheet method. Now, you could have your own user face already built and just use this import Excel spreadsheet. Maybe you watched this video just so that you could understand this transfer spreadsheet method. But I'm going to go ahead and create my own user interface for people to follow along with in case you don't already have one. So I'm going to go to Create tab and Form Design. And I'm going to just resize the form here to make it nice sized for what we're going to do. And I'm going to go ahead and add a new text box, And this text box is going to contain the file name of the Excel spreadsheet we're going to import. So we'll do file name is the label. And let's just go ahead and move this around to get a little bit more room on our form. And let's resize this text box so that we can view the full name of our file. And along with this text box that contains the file name, I also like to have a browse button. So I'm going to add a button here. And this browse button is going to allow the user to go out to their hard drive and select a particular file that they want to import. So I'm going to go to my command button, and I'm going to rename this from command 2 to btn browse. And I'll also go ahead and change the label here to browse. And while I'm at it, I should probably also go ahead and change this text box name from text0 to txt file name. So we have a text box that's going to contain the file name. We have a browse button that's going to go and allow us to go search for a file on our hard drive. And we should probably also then go ahead and add another button that's going to call the import command that we wrote here, the import Excel spreadsheet method, this subroutine. So I'm going to make this button, I'm going to say import spreadsheet. And let's go ahead and resize the button by double clicking on the bottom right hand corner here. And let's rename this from command 3 to button import spreadsheet. So now we've got the basics of our form. It's a very simple form. It's not too complicated. Again, you could have your own form that already has maybe a list of Excel spreadsheets already in the database. So maybe you have a table full of Excel spreadsheet names. Whatever the case is, this is just, again, a small little example of how you can build a user interface to then call this import Excel spreadsheet method. So on my browse button, I'm going to go ahead and go to the event tab and go to the on click event ellipsis here, do the code builder. And I want to open up a new file dialog window. So I'm going to create a dim, and I'm just going to call this object diag as a new office. And you can see office does not come up with any IntelliSense. And that's because the office class library that I'm looking for is not currently referenced in a blank database. So I need to go up to Tools, References, and I'm going to scroll down here to Microsoft Office Object Library. And this is going to be version 15.0 for me, but if you're working from a different version of Microsoft Office or Microsoft Access, then this is going to have a different number here. But for me, since I'm working out of 2013, my Office version is actually 15.0. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now you'll see that if I try to retype Office, we get the IntelliSense there. So we're going to do office.fileDialog. That's the class that I want to instantiate. And speaking of instantiation, I need to do set. So I'm setting my diag object equal to, and the file dialog object actually exists in application.fileDialog, and this is actually a method. It's kind of goofy. It shows it up as a property here. I'm not really sure why it shows it up as a property. It's actually a method that accepts a dialog type of MSO. So here we have an enumerable here that tells us the different types of file dialogs we can open. And we're going to do file dialog file picker. That's just the first one there. And that will create a new file dialog and set it to our diag object here. Now on our diag object, we need to set a few properties to make the user experience a little bit better. So to do this, I'm going to do diag, and I'm going to say the allow multi-select I don't want them to be able to do. I want the user to be able to only pick one file at a time from this file dialog window. So I'm going to set this equal to false. I'm also going to change the title of the window to something like, say, please select an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm also going to work with the filters of my file picker. So I'm going to go to diag filters. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Diag filters. And the filters is a property of, it's a collection property. So that means that we can add and clear and delete different items. So I'm actually going to go ahead and clear what's in there just in case there's anything in there right now. And then I'm going to do diag filters again. And I'm going to go ahead and add a new filter. And in this add method, I can pass along a description as string. So that would be Excel spreadsheets. And then I need to also pass on a extensions. So the extensions as a string, and that would be things like *.xls, comma, *.xlsx. So those are the two different types of file extensions that we want this user to be able to select from the file picker. Now I'm also going to do diag.show, and diag.show actually returns a value, a long value. And when it does that, it's basically telling you how many different items were selected by the user. And if we wrap this in an if statement, that's going to check to see, was there anything that was selected? If not, then we wouldn't want to perform the code that's going to put the file name into the text box if there's been no file selected. So wrapping this in a file, or wrapping this .show in an if statement checks to see if the user has selected any files at all. And if they have, then we'll do if diag show then, and I'll put my end if here. So if they did select something, we're actually going to need to access the diag.selectedItems collection. And this is a collection. And as such, since it's a collection, we need to iterate through it using the for each loop. So even though there's only going to be one item selected, we still want to loop through the selected items list. And whenever we're doing a for each loop, we need to create some sort of object that each new iteration is going to fill with that object type. So we're going to do for each item in diag.selectedItems, and I haven't defined item yet, so it would actually error out if I left it this way. So I need to go ahead and dim item as, I'm just going to call this a variant, which means variant, of course, as most of you guys know, means I have no idea what type of object this is. It's just going to figure it out when the code is actually running during runtime. So now for my for each loop, I'm just going to delete this because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to do next at the end of my for each loop. And now we're going to iterate through each selected item on our file picker. I can go ahead and now say on this form, the me.txt file name, I'm just going to set it to item. And because item is actually going to be a string of the file name that's been selected from this selected items list. So I'm just filling in the txt file name with the item that has been selected. So let's go ahead and save all of this now. And let's name our form import Excel spreadsheets or spreadsheet. And the module name, let's do Excel import. Okay, so now that everything is saved, let's go ahead and debug it and compile it just to make sure we didn't fat finger anything. And let's just make sure this browse button works now. So we'll do browse, and we can see please select an Excel spreadsheet. And our only options for filters here are Excel spreadsheets. So we don't have the option to do all or anything like that. That just makes the user experience a little bit nicer, and they're only going to see the Excel spreadsheets and folders. So I'm just going to go ahead and select my sample Superstore sales Excel spreadsheet here and click OK. And we can see that fills in our text box with the full path and file name to our Excel spreadsheet. So our browse button works just fine. Now that we've got that down, we can go ahead and focus on the Import Spreadsheet button. So let's go ahead and go back into the design view. I'm going to click on the Import Spreadsheet button and go to the Event tab and select On Click Event, and go to the ellipsis code builder And here we're going to add our logic that's going to actually call this method that we created at the beginning of the video to import the Excel spreadsheet. Now, before we call that, we should probably check on a few things. For example, what if the user doesn't put anything here in the file name? Or what if the user picks a file name and then accidentally mistypes it? So maybe puts an extra character in there, or forgets the file name itself and just puts a path name. We should probably check all of that before we actually pass along the values to the import Excel spreadsheet method. So to do that, let's go ahead and go to the import spreadsheet method again here, or the button on click event. And from here, we're going to use the file system object to go out and verify that the file that the user put into that text box exists. To do that, I'm going to dim a new object, and I'm going to call this FSO as file system, and you can see that we're missing file system object. So that's because just like what we had up here when we tried to access the Office class library, the file system object class is not currently available to us. So we need to go up to Tools, References, and here we're going to look for Microsoft Scripting Runtime. And this is where the file system object class lives. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And you'll see now if I do as file, actually I'm going to do this as a new file system object, we can see that we got the IntelliSense that we needed to go ahead and create that file system object. Now, using this file system object, I can go out and check to see if the file exists. So we'll say if FSO file exists, we're just going to pass along to the file exists method the text that's in the text box. So we'll do me.txt file name, and then and if. So if the file does exist, then we should be pretty good, because obviously if we already know what the file name, the file exists, then we must have a valid file name there, and we can pass that along then to our import Excel spreadsheet method that we had here. So let's go ahead and call that. We'll do, I'm just going to use the module name here to make things easier for the IntelliSense. I'm going to do Excel import dot, and now you can see there's that method that we created, import Excel spreadsheet, and it accepts a file name as string. So that would be me.txt file name. And now it also needs that table name. Remember, we created that parameter that should be taking the file, the table name as well. And as of right now, we don't really have any place that we're getting the table name. And I could certainly pass this along as a string now. So I could say like imported file would be the name of my table if I wanted to. Or you could, in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the name of the file itself. And I'm just going to use the file system object once again to get this. I'm going to go get file name. And that way I'm passing in the actual file name and naming my table the name of the file. That's not including the full path. That's just the actual file name, including the extension. So that's this sample-superstore sales excel.xls. That's going to be the actual name of my table in my Access database. So we'll do get file name from that me.txt file name, and that will return just the file name. And that's it. We've now successfully called the import Excel spreadsheet method. But there's actually something else that's going to come up as a problem here, and I'm going to show you here. If I save this and debug it and compile it, things may outwardly seem just fine. So if we go view, and we already have my Excel spreadsheet in this text box, so I could do import spreadsheet, and here we go. We're importing and we're importing and we're importing. There we go. There's our sample, there's our table of our Excel spreadsheet. And I can double click on this and I can open it up and see that there are 8,399 rows of data. And of course, that's again, just in case some of you guys are wondering, even though this shows 8,400 rows here, remember the first row is actually our column names. So that's how we got 8,399 values. Now everything seems hunky-dory. It looks like everything worked just fine, right? But what happens if I put an extra character in here? So I put an extra space and now I do import. Well, what happens? Nothing. Okay. Well, maybe that's not the user experience you want. Maybe, they think that they've re-imported it. So if I delete this and import spreadsheet, I get nothing, right? That's not really a great user experience. So I'm going to go back into the design of this button, and I'm actually going to go to check to make sure if that file doesn't exist, that the user gets some sort of message back. So I'm going to do an else statement on this if, and I'm going to say if the file doesn't exist, then let's pop up a message. So message box file not found. Okay, simple enough. So we'll do save and view this. And now, again, I have that extra space. I'll just add another one there just to be sure. Import spreadsheet and, oh, file not found. So that at least tells the user why there's no table that's been imported. But what about if I leave this blank and then I hit import spreadsheet? Invalid use of null. Well, that's really not good. Where'd that come from? Well, it's because the file exists method expects that there's some sort of value that's going to be passed in here. So what I need to do is I could do really one of two things. I could say wrap this text box in an NZ function, which will turn a null into some other character. And I'm just going to say turn a null into a blank string. Okay, so if we do that, save that, debug, compile, okay, and we do import spreadsheet, file not found. Okay, great. So files not found. That's okay. That still doesn't really tell the user exactly what the problem is. They might be able to deduce it, but you know what? I'd like to be even a bit more explicit about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this. I'm going to say if nz me.txt file name returns a blank string, oops, then we're going to pop up a message box. We'll do a message box, please select a file. And then we need to exit out of the subroutine so that it doesn't continue on to these other functions here. So we'll do please select a file, exit the subroutine, and we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and save that, debug this, and compile. And now, if the user leaves it blank and they click on import spreadsheet, they get please select a file. So we get some better validation here. Now, there's another scenario that you need to account for in this window, and that is if I click on browse, and let's just say I'm a real thrifty user, and I know, you know what, I don't want an Excel spreadsheet. I want to do star.star. And this allows me to go look for, oh, look, I can see other files. Let's hit this access query best practices text file. Okay, and now let's try to import it. Uh-oh, external table is not in the expected format. So we need to verify that this is in fact a .xls file and that it's not some other format. Now I'm going to take kind of the cheater's way of doing this. You could go and look at the file extension to see that whether or not this is a .xls or a .xlsx file. But I'm going to use error handling to manage this instead. So I'm going to go to my Excel import method here, or my Excel import module, where I have my import Excel spreadsheet method. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some error handling here. So I'm going to do on error go to, we'll call it bad format. And down at the bottom here, I'm going to go ahead and just call this bad format, put a colon there. And if this do command is successful, we don't want it to move on to this bad format. So I'm going to put down after this exit sub. That way, after it runs this command successfully, it'll just exit the subroutine. But if it doesn't execute successfully, then this go to bad format will drop it down to this error handling node here. So under bad format, I'm just going to go ahead and do message box. The file you tried to import was not an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that. And now, if I try to import the text file, the file you tried to import was not an Excel spreadsheet. So there you go. And you could, of course, check to make sure that the error number is correct to match up to that, that error handler. Otherwise, maybe kick out a different error message. But that's just kind of a nice little cheater's way, I think, of making sure that all of your bases are covered here and that somebody doesn't try to import the wrong type of file. So there you have it. There is, from top to bottom, from user interface to the actual method to the access commands that do the actual import, there's everything that you're looking for on how to import an Excel spreadsheet to an access table. And then from there, of course, you can write your queries against this new table. You can, maybe copy it to another location, or you can save it as your all-time favorite, your most favorite data that you've ever had, and it's so special to you. Whatever you want to do to this table, you are welcome to do. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe, and tell all your friends and coworkers that how wonderful and stupendous this video channel is, and they should all subscribe as well. That would be wonderful. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.